Forbidden history, the banned prophecy of the Templars unveiling the end of days. They found it where shadows gather deepest. Not in some grand cathedral or gilded treasury, but hidden behind crumbling stones, sealed away from prying eyes for 7 long centuries. When archaeologists finally broke through that ancient barrier in 2001, what emerged from the darkness wasn't just another medieval relic. It was something that would shake the very foundations of everything we thought we knew about the Knights Templar and their final, desperate warning to humanity. Inside that lead-lined box lay a disc of mysterious metal, cold to the touch and etched with symbols no Templar artifact was ever meant to bear. At its center, a 6-armed cross, but one arm was deliberately broken, shattered as if to mark some cosmic wound. Radiating outward were celestial glyphs and astronomical markers that, when decoded, revealed something that made even seasoned historians' blood run cold. A date. Not from the distant past, but from our very near future. This is the story of the last sigil, and tonight we're going to uncover a prophecy so dangerous that an entire religious order was destroyed to keep it hidden. So settle in, keep the lights low, and prepare yourself for a journey into the forbidden corners of history where some truths were never meant to see daylight. You can feel it, can't you? That electric tension that comes when you're about to discover something that changes everything. Because what we're exploring tonight isn't just another conspiracy theory or historical curiosity. This is about a warning encoded in metal and stone, passed down through secret channels, preserved by those who knew that someday someone would need to understand what's coming. The Knights Templar. Just the name conjures images of armored warriors, sacred relics, and mysteries wrapped in layers of legend. But forget everything you think you know about grails and bloodlines and ancient treasures. What we're dealing with here is far more unsettling, far more immediate, and infinitely more real. Our story begins in the French countryside, in a modest chapel that most tourists would pass without a second glance. Its roof sags with age, moss creeps up weathered stones, and the bell tower hasn't held a bell in centuries. But beneath this humble exterior lies a secret that reaches back to the very heart of one of history's most enigmatic orders. It was spring 2001 when the restoration team arrived. Funded through channels so discreet they barely left a paper trail, their mission was supposedly simple: structural reinforcement and historical preservation. But among their number was someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Dr. Hervé Langlais, a symbologist from Marseille, had built his reputation on theories that made his colleagues uncomfortable. He saw patterns where others saw coincidence, connections where others saw chaos, and it was Langlais who noticed something wrong with the altar wall. The stones were too clean, the mortar too fresh for a medieval structure. When tapped, the wall rang hollow. Something was hidden behind it, something someone had sealed away centuries ago with deliberate care. The process of breaking through took 2 days, done mostly by torchlight to avoid attracting attention. Behind that false wall lay a small alcove carved directly from bedrock. At its center sat a lead box, perfectly sealed, wrapped in fragments of silk that should have rotted away long ago. Inside, cushioned in velvet that matched the discus curves exactly, was the artifact that would change everything. The sigil was unlike anything in the known Templar archives. Its weight suggested an alloy that resisted easy classification. Some called it meteoric, though no tests have confirmed that theory. What mattered wasn't its composition, but what was etched across its surface with microscopic precision. The 6-armed cross at its center wasn't just damaged. That broken arm was deliberate, purposeful, as if marking the moment when divine harmony fractured. Around this central symbol ran rings of astronomical glyphs, planetary markers that seemed familiar yet wrong. like shadow versions of the constellations we know. The outermost ring bore notches so fine they were barely visible to the naked eye, forming what experts would later recognize as a substitution cipher of staggering complexity. But here's where the story takes its first chilling turn. Within weeks of the discovery, Langla resigned his academic position, left Marseille, and vanished into a monastery in Corsica. He hasn't spoken publicly since. The official report filed with the Ministry of Culture omitted the find entirely, and the disc itself, if reports are accurate, was never catalogued into any known institutional archive. This silence speaks volumes about what that artifact represented, because what Langla discovered in those first crucial days of analysis was something that shouldn't have been possible. The cipher around the sigil's edge, when decoded using astronomical tables, aligned with planetary movements leading up to a very specific date in our near future. Not the past, the future. The implications were staggering. How could a group of 14th century warrior monks have calculated celestial alignments with precision that rivals modern astronomy? What knowledge did they possess that allowed them to encode warnings for an age they would never see? As word of the discovery leaked through private channels, a pattern began to emerge. This wasn't the first time the broken cross symbol had appeared. Fragments of it showed up in scattered locations across Europe, always associated with Templar sites, always hidden, always feared. Ancient manuscripts mentioned it in whispers. Trial records from the Inquisition referenced it in testimony extracted under torture. The symbol had a name, the Seal of the Sixth Light. And according to fragmentary records, it marked not just a prophecy, but a countdown, a celestial clock ticking toward an alignment that would return after more than 7 centuries of waiting. But who were the Templars, really? Beyond the legends and Hollywood fantasies, they were something far more complex and mysterious than history books suggest. Founded in 1119 to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, they quickly evolved into something unprecedented, a military order that was also a financial empire, a spiritual brotherhood that was also a network of scholars and mystics. Their rapid rise to power wasn't built on swordplay alone. The Templars became the keepers of knowledge, translating and preserving texts from Islamic scholars, Byzantine libraries, and sources that predate recorded history. They weren't just crusaders. They were cosmic archivists, gathering wisdom from every corner of the known world. And somewhere in that vast collection of forbidden knowledge, they found something that terrified them. Something that spoke of cycles within cycles, of celestial machinery that governed the rise and fall of ages. Something that revealed the precise moment when that machinery would shift again. The evidence for this cosmic awareness runs deeper than most historians are comfortable admitting. Templar architecture incorporated astronomical alignments with uncanny precision. Their ritual calendar followed celestial cycles that wouldn't be formally understood for centuries. And in their final years, as persecution closed in around them, they began encoding their most dangerous secrets into symbols, ciphers, and artifacts designed to survive the coming darkness. Which brings us back to that broken cross, that fractured sixth arm. In Templar symbology, the cross wasn't just a badge or decoration. It was a metaphysical diagram, a map of cosmic forces in perfect balance. The traditional 4 arms represented the cardinal directions, the elements, the foundations of their spiritual worldview. But this corrupted version violated that sacred geometry, introduced an unnatural axis that tilted everything off balance. Some researchers believe the broken arm represents divine interruption, a moment when the celestial order itself would collapse by a fraction. Others see it as a marker of cosmic rupture, the point where harmony gives way to chaos. But the most disturbing theory suggests something else entirely, that the break isn't damage but drama, a symbolic representation of the moment when divine communication itself falls silent. This interpretation gains weight when we examine the trial records from the Templars' final days. Under torture, Some initiates describe ceremonies where crosses were deliberately broken, where sacred symbols were corrected to reflect a hidden truth. They spoke of a false sign with 6 wings that was carried in their most secret rites. Most dismissed this as ravings extracted under duress, but what if it was something more? What if the Templars had discovered that the universe itself was out of tune? That the cosmic harmony they'd been taught to revere was already fracturing? What if their final mission wasn't to protect treasure or bloodlines, but to preserve a warning about the moment when that fracture would complete itself? The mathematical precision embedded in the sigil suggests exactly this kind of cosmic timekeeping. When modern computers analyze its geometry, they reveal patterns that shouldn't exist in medieval metalwork. Golden ratio spirals, Fibonacci intervals, fractal resonances that mirror the structure of galaxies and DNA alike. It's as if the artifact encodes not just information, but the fundamental mathematics of reality itself. At the dead center of the disk lies a tiny depression, perfectly circular, too precise to be accidental wear. Computer modeling suggests this central point functions as a focal node, a place where light and shadow converge under specific conditions. When the sigil is rotated at precise angles under certain illumination, it creates optical effects that border on the supernatural. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is the hidden frequency. When laser scanned and processed through acoustic analysis software, the sigil's surface texture generates a harmonic resonance at exactly 729 Hz. That number, 729, appears again and again in the hidden mathematics of the artifact. It's 3 to the 6th power, a number that resonates through Hermetic traditions as the number of restoration. And here's where mathematics becomes prophecy. 729 years after the dissolution of the Templar Order in 1310 brings us to 2039, the same year encoded in the sigil's astronomical cipher, the same alignment that will bring Mercury, Mars and Saturn into a configuration not seen since the 14th century. The convergence is undeniable. Every thread of evidence points toward the same conclusion. The Knights Templar weren't just preserving treasure or protecting secrets. They were maintaining a cosmic clock, a device designed to mark the moment when heaven's machinery would shift into a new configuration. But who built this clock? The craftsmanship required exceeds medieval capabilities by centuries. The astronomical knowledge encoded within it suggests access to data that shouldn't have existed. Some point to Islamic scholars, others to Byzantine texts. But even these sources lack the precision we find in the sigil's calculations. A darker possibility emerges when we trace the artifact's true origins. What if the Templars didn't create the sigil but inherited it? What if they were simply the latest in a long line of guardians, keepers of knowledge that stretches back through Islamic astronomers to Egyptian star priests, to Babylonian mathematicians, and beyond? This would explain the artifact's impossible precision, its alien geometry, its resistance to easy classification. It would also explain why the Templars were so desperate to preserve it, even at the cost of their own destruction. Because if the sigil truly represents knowledge from a lost civilization, then its warning carries weight beyond anything medieval minds could have conceived. The pattern becomes clear when we examine similar artifacts scattered across the ancient world. Stone circles that align with celestial events, pyramids that encode astronomical constants, manuscripts that describe cosmic cycles stretching across millennia. All of them point toward the same truth. Human civilization has danced to celestial rhythms since the beginning of recorded time. And now those rhythms are shifting again. The alignment approaches, the mathematical countdown reaches its final phases, and the broken cross prepares to speak once more. But speak to whom? And what will it say when the stars finally fall into their appointed places? As we dig deeper into this mystery, one thing becomes increasingly clear. We're not dealing with medieval superstition or religious fantasy. we're confronting evidence of a cosmic intelligence that has been watching, waiting, and preparing for a moment that's almost upon us. A moment when the sixth arm of the cross aligns with forces that dwarf human understanding. The Templars died to protect this knowledge. Scholars have vanished trying to decode it. Governments have suppressed investigations into its implications. And still, the sigil waits, patient as stone, counting down the final moments until what? That's the question that haunts everyone who encounters this mystery, because prophecy, by its very nature, demands fulfillment, and the fulfillment the Templars foresaw may be closer than any of us imagine. The trail grows cold in medieval archives, but it doesn't end there. Because what happened to the Templars after their supposed destruction tells a story that history books prefer to ignore. While King Philip IV of France celebrated his victory over the Order, while Pope Clement V proclaimed their heresy to the world, something else was happening in the shadows. The Templars weren't just vanishing, they were transforming. Contemporary records from the period reveal a curious phenomenon. Nearly 15% of the Order's documented members simply disappeared without a trace. Not executed, not imprisoned, not fled to England or Portugal, just gone. For an organization under the most intense persecution in medieval Europe, this level of successful evasion should have been impossible, unless, of course, someone higher up was quietly facilitating their escape. The pattern becomes clear when you examine the arrest records more closely. The knights who vanished weren't chosen randomly. They were the astronomers, the translators, the keepers of the Order's most esoteric knowledge. The very men who would have understood what the sigil represented, who would have known why its preservation mattered more than their own lives. One name surfaces repeatedly in the fragmentary records: Frater Leontius. Not a Grand Master or ranking dignitary, just a footnote in the vast machinery of persecution. But beside his name appears a phrase that chills the blood: Guardian of the Last Sigil. When that same designation appears again decades later in a separate ecclesiastical inventory, it becomes clear that we're dealing with something far more organized than random flight. The manuscript that bears Leontius's name, discovered in 1993 in a private library in Arles, reads more like a desperate confession than a historical document. Written in corrupted Latin mixed with Provençal, it describes a frantic journey through the Pyrenees, the burial of the circle that speaks, and cryptic instructions that sound less like theology and more like technical specifications. One passage has been translated roughly as, "The sign is not a symbol, it is a sentence spoken not with voice, but with sky. When the sixth light breaks and the host turns away, none shall be ready." The odd phrasing suggests either mental distress or a specialized vocabulary developed for concepts that had no common words. But here's what makes this manuscript impossible to dismiss. It references specific geographical locations that were later confirmed through independent archaeological evidence. A ruined sanctuary near Montgur is described as the final hollow, where I laid the circle down and folded the stone behind me. When excavations were conducted in 1997, they found exactly what the manuscript described: a sealed chamber with a velvet-lined recess and a broken copper hinge that matches the description of the Bezout box. This suggests a chain of custody spanning centuries. If Frater Leontius truly fled with the sigil and buried it at Montgur, then someone must have exhumed it later and moved it to Bezout. The time gap is immense, nearly 700 years. So who maintained this vigil across the rise and fall of kingdoms? The answer may lie in the manuscript's final pages, badly burned, but still legible. The author writes, "They who watch are not seen. They need no name. They are the eyes between chapters." This cryptic reference to a hidden lineage appears nowhere in official church records, yet the idea persists that while the Order burned publicly, a silent few simply melted away into the shadows. The evidence for this shadow organization accumulates slowly, like sediment in still water. A carved symbol here, A marginal note there, fragments of the broken cross appearing in locations where no Templar presence was ever officially recorded. Always hidden, always protected, always waiting. In the Black Forest of Germany, a curious account from 1894 describes a nocturnal procession of 13 hooded figures circling a stone marked with the familiar six-pointed star. The witness, a Prussian engineer named Dietrich Clausen, wrote in his journal of hearing a low rhythmic hum that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. He found a pendant the next morning, engraved with planetary symbols and the same broken cross design. Clausen kept that pendant for 3 years before drowning mysteriously in his own bathtub. His wife reported that he had become increasingly paranoid, speaking in his sleep about turning mirrors and the tongue of silence. The pendant itself vanished from archives in 1981, leaving only a grainy photograph and more questions. Similar accounts surface across Europe throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Always the same elements: hooded figures, astronomical symbols, mysterious humming sounds, and the inevitable disappearance or death of witnesses. The pattern suggests not isolated incidents, but coordinated activity, a network operating according to principles that span generations. The mathematical precision of this network becomes apparent when you plot the locations on a map. They form geometric patterns that mirror the sigil's own structure, creating a vast terrestrial version of its cosmic geometry. Each site corresponds to specific astronomical sightlines, creating a kind of distributed observatory designed to track celestial movements across centuries. This brings us to one of the most unsettling discoveries in the entire investigation. Hidden in the archives of Toledo, a scroll dated roughly 1325 bears an eerie verse in Latin. "When the stars return to the broken order and the sixth light falls, then shall light turn to iron, and the last sigil shall cry out." The language of return, of something coming back, echoes through document after document. The scholars who've studied these texts agree on one point. This wasn't about their time. It was about ours. The Templars weren't just preserving knowledge. They were maintaining a countdown, a celestial alarm clock set to ring in an age they would never see. But countdown to what? The clues scattered through their hidden writings speak of convergence, of alignment, of the moment when the wheel turns and the mirror speaks. They describe not destruction, but transformation, not ending, but transition. The broken sixth arm of the cross, they suggest, marks not damage, but potential, the point where old harmonies give way to new configurations. Modern analysis of the sigil reveals why this moment matters. The artifact's geometry creates what physicists call a harmonic collapse at precisely 729 Hz when subjected to specific light frequencies. That's not just symbolic resonance, it's mechanical response. The sigil appears to be designed not just to mark the alignment, but to react to it. This raises the terrifying possibility that we're not dealing with a passive warning, but an active trigger. What if the sigil doesn't just predict the cosmic shift, but participates in it? What if 7 centuries of careful preservation weren't about keeping knowledge safe, but about ensuring it would be in the right place at the right time? The Watchers, if they still exist, would understand this better than anyone. They've had centuries to study the artifact, to decode its deeper mysteries, to prepare for the moment when theory becomes reality. And if recent patterns are any indication, that moment is approaching faster than anyone anticipated, because the sigil isn't just counting down to 2039 anymore. Sensitive instruments have begun detecting anomalies in electromagnetic fields during minor planetary alignments. Frequency spikes at exactly 729 Hz have been recorded over Central Europe during recent conjunctions. Even more disturbing, a satellite monitoring deep space radiation experienced a complete data blackout while passing over the coordinates of Bézieux, France. The technician's report was classified, but one line leaked. The signal came from below. Not from space, not from the atmosphere, but from something terrestrial, something waiting underground, something that's beginning to stir as the stars move toward their appointed places. The implications stretch far beyond academic curiosity. If the Templars were right, if their cosmic clock truly marks a moment of transformation, then everything we think we know about reality itself may be about to change. The broken cross, the fractured sixth arm, may represent not cosmic damage, but cosmic evolution, the point where one age ends and another begins, and we're running out of time to understand what that means. The alignment draws closer with each passing day. The mathematics become more precise, the convergence more inevitable. Somewhere in the shadows, the descendants of the Watchers prepare for a moment 7 centuries in the making. The sigil waits in its hidden chamber, patient as stone, cold as prophecy. Its broken arm points toward a future we can barely imagine, toward changes that will reshape not just human consciousness, but the very fabric of space and time. The Templars died to preserve this warning, and now that warning is almost ready to speak. The question that haunts every researcher who encounters this mystery is simple and terrible. What happens when it does? But prophecy, as the medieval mind understood it, wasn't about seeing the future with crystal clarity. It was about recognizing the eternal patterns that govern existence itself. To the Templars, time wasn't a straight line marching towards some distant judgment day. It moved like the heavens themselves, in cycles, in rhythms, in great wheels turning within wheels. And if you understand this cyclical nature of prophecy, then what the sigil represents becomes far more unsettling than simple prediction. It becomes a roadmap for forces that have operated since the dawn of civilization, forces that are stirring once again as we approach the alignment they've been waiting for. The deeper we dig into the Templar archives, the more we discover that their final years weren't spent in military campaigns or financial scheming. They were racing against time, desperately trying to preserve knowledge that they knew would be needed centuries in the future, knowledge that someone, someday, would have to act upon. Consider the curious case of Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars. History remembers his defiant words as the flames consumed him on that island in the Seine. "Pope Clement, King Philip, I summon you to the judgment of God." Both men died within a year, leading many to believe in the curse of the martyred Templar. But according to a single document preserved in restricted French archives, those weren't his only words. A monk named Father Eligius, known for recording the uncomfortable details that others preferred to forget, wrote that de Molay spoke of something else as the fire took him. He looked upward toward the sky and whispered, "The time of shadow returns, and the stars prepare again their shape. You have silenced the guardians, but the sky remembers." The reference to stars preparing their shape suggests knowledge that goes far beyond medieval astronomy. It implies an understanding of celestial mechanics that wouldn't be formally recognized for centuries. And that final phrase, "the sky remembers," echoes through esoteric Templar writings with haunting consistency. In their hidden texts, the heavens weren't seen merely as God's decoration for the night sky. They were viewed as a vast recording device, a cosmic memory bank that stored the patterns of existence itself. The stars didn't just shine, they remembered. They maintained the great cycles that govern the rise and fall of civilizations, the ebb and flow of consciousness, the rhythm of creation itself. This interpretation explains why the Templars were so obsessed with astronomical precision. They weren't just curious about the movements of planets, they were trying to read the cosmic script, to understand when the next great turning would occur. And what they discovered in that ancient knowledge terrified them enough to encode it in metal and bury it in stone. The trail of evidence becomes clearer when we examine what happened immediately after de Molay's execution. a strange document appeared in a monastery in Aragon, unsigned but bearing the Templar seal. It contained just one cryptic message. The key has turned. The last guardian has spoken. The rest shall lie in shadow until the wheel returns. That document vanished from public records for 600 years. But when Dr. Langler opened the sealed box at Bézieux in 2001, his personal notes contained a single sentence before he disappeared into monastic silence. The wheel is turning again. The connection is too precise to be coincidental. Somehow, across 7 centuries of secrecy and suppression, the same cosmic awareness that guided the Templars' final actions had survived. The Watchers, whatever form they had taken, were still maintaining their vigil. But the Vatican's response to the Templar trials reveals something even more disturbing. Among the thousands of documents generated during the persecution, certain records were not just classified, they were actively suppressed. Pages were blacked out completely, sealed with papal authority, marked with a code that meant hidden under watch. One of these suppressed documents, known only through fragmentary references, was called the Scroll of the Seventh Seal. Not a reference to biblical apocalypse, but to something called the Circle of Broken Symmetry, and the iron tongue that speaks only when the stars align. The few scholars who glimpsed portions of this document before its suppression described it as containing not theology, but cosmology, a kind of dark astronomy wrapped in medieval codes. The Vatican's own involvement deepens the mystery. Within weeks of the sigil's discovery at Bézieux, a previously unknown cardinal arrived with diplomatic credentials. The site was immediately shut down, and the artifact vanished into channels that leave no paper trail. The Church's official position remains unchanged. No knowledge of the object, no comment on its significance. But silence, as we've learned, can speak volumes. The pattern of suppression around the sigil matches exactly the pattern that surrounded the original Templar persecution. Knowledge too dangerous to acknowledge, too important to destroy, carefully preserved in shadows until the time comes for its revelation. And that time appears to be approaching with mathematical precision. The astronomical alignment encoded in the sigil isn't some vague convergence of planets. It's a specific configuration that occurs with clockwork regularity every 729 years. Mercury, Mars, and Saturn drawing together in the constellation Virgo, creating gravitational resonances that ripple through the solar system like stones thrown into still water. Ancient civilizations tracked these alignments with obsessive dedication. The Mayans built their calendar around them. The Egyptians oriented their pyramids to mark them. The Babylonians developed complex mathematical systems to predict them. And now, modern science is beginning to understand why these moments mattered so much to our ancestors. Recent studies in archaeoastronomy have revealed that major planetary alignments coincide with significant shifts in human consciousness and civilization. The alignment of 1347, for example, marked not just the beginning of the Black Death, but the end of the medieval worldview. The Renaissance, the Reformation, the Scientific Revolution, all emerged from the chaos that followed that celestial convergence. The implications for 2039 are staggering. If the pattern holds, if the cosmic cycles truly govern human development as the ancients believed, then we're approaching a transformation that will reshape not just society, but consciousness itself. The broken arm of the Templar cross may represent not damage, but evolution. The point where old ways of seeing give way to new forms of awareness. This interpretation gains support from an unexpected source: modern physics. Quantum mechanics has revealed that consciousness and reality are far more intertwined than classical science ever imagined. The observer effect, quantum entanglement, the holographic principle, all suggest that mind and cosmos operate according to principles that would have made perfect sense to medieval mystics. What if the Templars understood something about this relationship that we're only now rediscovering? What if their cosmic clock wasn't designed to predict external events, but internal transformations? shifts in human consciousness that occur when celestial conditions are precisely right. The sigil's harmonic properties support this theory. That 729 Hz frequency isn't just mathematical curiosity. It corresponds to brainwave patterns associated with deep meditative states and mystical experiences. When the alignment occurs, when the planets fall into their appointed places, that frequency may resonate through the Earth's magnetic field like a vast tuning fork, affecting every conscious being on the planet. The Watchers would have known this. 7 centuries of careful study would have revealed the sigil's true purpose, not as a warning about external catastrophe, but as a key to internal transformation. The broken cross, the fractured 6th arm, may represent the moment when ordinary consciousness breaks open to reveal something far greater. But transformation, as every mystic knows, requires preparation. The human mind must be ready for the frequencies it's about to encounter. The cosmic downloading system must be properly calibrated, and perhaps most importantly, someone must be present to guide the process when it begins. This would explain the recent emergence of what researchers call the revivalist movement. Individuals across the globe who report dreams, visions, and intuitive knowledge about the approaching alignment. They describe feeling drawn to specific locations, experiencing spontaneous understanding of ancient symbols, hearing what they describe as a cosmic hum that grows stronger each year. These aren't random occurrences. The pattern is too widespread, too consistent, too precisely timed to be coincidence. Something is awakening in human consciousness, responding to signals that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The sigil's influence extends far beyond its physical location, rippling through the collective unconscious, like waves from a stone dropped in deep water. Modern technology has begun detecting these ripples in ways the Templars never could have imagined. Satellite monitoring reveals electromagnetic anomalies that spike during minor planetary alignments. Seismic sensors pick up low-frequency vibrations that seem to emanate from areas with no geological activity. Even more mysteriously, several deep space monitoring stations have reported brief but intense signal bursts from coordinates that correspond to ancient sacred sites. The signals all share the same characteristic frequency, 729 Hz, the same resonance embedded in the sigil's geometry, the same number that marks the countdown to 2039, the same harmonic that may unlock human consciousness when the cosmic conditions are finally right. But unlock it to what? The Templar texts speak of the host that shall not descend, and the silence where thunder should be. They describe not divine revelation, but divine withdrawal, the moment when the old gods fall silent and humanity must learn to hear the cosmos directly. This interpretation transforms the broken cross from symbol of loss to symbol of liberation. The fractured 6th arm doesn't represent cosmic damage but cosmic evolution. The point where mediated revelation gives way to direct gnosis, where humanity graduates from faith to knowledge. The implications stretch far beyond religious or mystical concerns. If consciousness truly operates according to cosmic rhythms, then the approaching alignment may trigger developments in human awareness that will revolutionize every field of knowledge. Science, art, philosophy, technology, all may undergo transformations as profound as the Renaissance, but compressed into a much shorter time frame. The Watchers, if they still maintain their ancient vigil, would understand this better than anyone. They've spent centuries preparing for a moment when theory becomes reality, when the abstract mathematics of cosmic harmony translate into concrete changes in human consciousness. And according to every indicator we can measure, that moment is almost upon us. The alignment approaches with mechanical inevitability. The frequency anomalies grow stronger. The dreams and visions multiply. Somewhere in hidden archives, ancient calendars tick towards zero. The sigil waits in its chamber, patient as prophecy itself, ready to fulfill the purpose for which it was created 7 centuries ago. Its broken cross points toward a future that will transform not just human civilization, but human nature itself. The Templars died to preserve this possibility, and now that possibility stands on the threshold of manifestation. The only question remaining is whether we're ready for what happens when the cosmic alarm clock finally rings. Because ready or not, the wheel is turning, the stars are moving into position, and the age of transformation is about to begin. The mathematics are undeniable. The patterns are converging. The countdown approaches 0, and in the silence that follows, everything changes. The silence speaks louder than words ever could. In the Vatican's deepest archives, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic dust and papal seals, lies evidence that the Church knew. They always knew, and what they knew was so dangerous, so fundamentally threatening to the established order, that they chose to bury it alive rather than risk its revelation. The document is called the Confessional Scrolls, and it shouldn't exist. Dating between 1308 and 1311, these testimonies were extracted during the grinding Inquisition against the Templars. Most were brutal affairs, conducted under methods the Church would later disavow. But among the hundreds of confessions, one stands apart like a wound in history itself. It's labelled De Septimo Signaculi, of the 7th seal. Not the biblical apocalypse, but something far more specific and infinitely more terrifying. The document describes rituals performed in silence beneath the lion's stars by those who held no banner. It speaks of the circle of broken symmetry and the iron tongue that speaks only when the stars align. The scholar who discovered this document in 1913, a young Jesuit named Lorenzo Gaspari, recognized immediately that he wasn't looking at standard heresy. This wasn't idol worship or inverted prayers or strange midnight ceremonies. This was cosmology. This was prophecy. This was a kind of dark astronomy wrapped in medieval theological codes that pointed towards something so significant it could reshape human understanding of reality itself. Gaspari attempted to present his findings at a symposium. He was politely removed from the panel. His notes were confiscated. His license to teach was revoked. A year later, he entered monastic silence, dying alone and unpublished in 1947. But one page of his research survived, smuggled out in the binding of a borrowed book. That single page contains a paraphrase of what Gaspari claimed was the scroll's final stanza. And when the crowned slow star returns and the 6th cross is seen cracked, let not the fathers look skyward, for the sign shall not ask permission. This isn't scripture, this is warning. And the crowned slow star can only refer to Saturn, the ancient symbol of time and limitation, the cosmic timekeeper that governs the great cycles of existence. But the Vatican's suppression goes deeper than individual documents. In the 1990s, researchers were granted limited access to digitized microfilm reels of Templar trial records. When scholars reviewed the reel labeled Trial Series 17A, they discovered something chilling. 6 pages completely blacked out. Not missing, present in form but obliterated in content. Each page bore the Vatican seal and a single word: celere. Be silent. Why preserve documents only to render them unreadable? The answer suggests something more disturbing than simple censorship. These weren't destroyed because they were false. They were hidden because they were true. And truth, in the wrong hands at the wrong time, can be more dangerous than any weapon. The pattern of suppression extends far beyond Vatican archives. In Cairo's Old Quarter, tucked behind a crumbling madrasa, a German Orientalist named Otto Reichenbach uncovered a collection of scrolls in 1926. Written in Arabic and Syriac, They contain diagrams that would have been impossible to dismiss if Reichenbach hadn't died so conveniently before presenting his findings. Among those diagrams was one that should have stopped history in its tracks. A six-armed cross, one arm broken, surrounded by glyphs disturbingly similar to those found on the Bezu sigil. The manuscript was titled Al-Tajamul Tawaku al-Nujum, the completion of the celestial awaiting, and beneath that ominous cross was written Al-Kitam al-Akhir, the final seal. The implications stretch across cultures and centuries. During the 12th and 13th centuries, the Templars maintained extensive contact with Islamic scholars. They weren't just warriors. They were collectors of forbidden knowledge, gathering wisdom from every tradition that crossed their path. And somehow, despite the religious chasm that separated Christian knights from Muslim astronomers, both sides recorded the same symbol, the same timing, the same stellar forecast. This wasn't cultural exchange. This was witnesses to the same cosmic truth, encoded in languages and symbols that transcended religious boundaries. The broken cross appears in Islamic manuscripts as the dark crown of Saturn pressing upon the head of Virgo. It emerges in Byzantine texts as the wheel that turns backwards when the iron tongue awakens. It haunts Egyptian papyri as the moment when the sky forgets its song. Too many traditions, too many cultures, too many separate discoveries of the same impossible truth for coincidence to explain it away. And then there are the Sibyls. Long before the Templars etched warnings into metal, before Islamic astronomers mapped the movements of planets, there were the prophetic voices of classical antiquity. Neither priestesses nor seers in the modern sense, they were considered vessels for divine truths that comfort couldn't contain. Hidden in a partial copy of the oracular Sibyllina, dated to the 2nd century but recopied throughout the medieval period, lies a passage that should chill anyone familiar with the sigil's symbolism. When 6 points pierce the wheel of stars, and the watchers blink not beneath Virgo's gaze, a silence shall descend upon man's tongue. The iron mark shall stir, and the order of heaven turn backwards. In 1321, an anonymous hand added a marginal note beside this stanza. Templum fractum, sigillum novissimum. Broken temple, last sigil. The connection was already recognized 7 centuries ago by someone who understood that these weren't separate mysteries, but fragments of a single, devastating truth. The Templars didn't invent this prophecy. They inherited it. They became the latest guardians in a chain of cosmic watchers that stretched back through Islamic stargazers, to Byzantine scholars, to Roman sibyls, to Egyptian priests, to Babylonian mathematicians, and beyond. Each tradition preserved pieces of the same cosmic puzzle. Each culture maintained fragments of the same celestial countdown, which means the sigil represents something far older and far more significant than medieval prophecy. It's a transmission device, a way of encoding astronomical knowledge so precisely that it could survive the rise and fall of civilizations. Not just a warning about what's coming, but instructions for what to do when it arrives. Consider the mathematical precision required. The sigil's geometry encodes planetary movements with accuracy that rivals modern astronomy. Its harmonic frequencies align with brainwave patterns associated with altered states of consciousness. Its symbolic structure mirrors the sacred geometry found in monuments from Easter Island to Stonehenge to the Great Pyramid itself. This wasn't created by 14th century monks working with primitive tools. This is the product of a scientific tradition so advanced, so sophisticated, that we're only now beginning to understand its implications. A tradition that understood consciousness and cosmos as aspects of a single unified system. The watchers who preserved this knowledge across millennia weren't just keeping secrets. They were maintaining a technology, not mechanical, not electronic, but psycho-spiritual. A way of interfacing human awareness with cosmic forces that operate on timescales beyond individual lifetimes, and that technology is about to activate. Modern satellite monitoring has detected electromagnetic anomalies that spike during planetary alignments. Deep space sensors pick up signal bursts from coordinates corresponding to ancient sacred sites. Even more mysteriously, several monitoring stations have reported brief but intense transmissions from locations where no technology should exist. The signals all share the same frequency, 729 Hz. The same resonance embedded in the sigil's geometry. The same harmonic that appears in Tibetan singing bowls, in the architecture of Gothic cathedrals, in the mathematical constants that govern quantum mechanics. It's as if the entire planet is beginning to ring like a vast bell, resonating with frequencies that have been building for centuries. The cosmic alarm clock isn't just counting down, it's starting to chime. The revivalist movement understands this better than academic scholars or religious authorities. Across the globe, individuals report spontaneous knowledge of symbols they've never studied, dreams of astronomical alignments they couldn't have calculated, visions of the broken cross appearing in contexts that make no logical sense. These aren't random occurrences. The pattern is too widespread, too consistent, too precisely timed. Something is awakening in human consciousness, responding to signals that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The sigil's influence extends far beyond its physical location, rippling through the collective unconscious like gravitational waves from a cosmic collision. But awakening to what? The suppressed texts speak of the silence where thunder should be, and the host that shall not descend. They describe not divine revelation, but divine withdrawal, the moment when humanity graduates from receiving truth to discovering it directly. The broken arm of the cross, viewed through this lens, represents not cosmic damage, but cosmic evolution, the point where one phase of human development ends and another begins. The moment when we stop looking to the sky for answers and start recognizing that we are the sky. That consciousness and cosmos operate according to principles that make separation an illusion. This interpretation explains why the knowledge was so carefully preserved and so ruthlessly suppressed. It threatens every power structure built on the assumption that truth comes from authority rather than direct experience. When individuals can interface with cosmic intelligence directly, when the astronomical movements translate into consciousness shifts that bypass all intermediaries, then every form of control becomes obsolete. The Vatican understood this. The Islamic authorities understood this. Every empire that encountered fragments of this knowledge understood that it represented the end of their relevance, which is why they preserved it in hidden archives while destroying everyone who tried to make it public. But preservation has its own logic. They couldn't destroy knowledge this important, even if they feared its implications. So they buried it, sealed it, scattered it across continents and centuries, waiting for a time when humanity would be ready to understand what it meant. That time appears to be now. The astronomical alignment approaches with mechanical precision. The electromagnetic anomalies intensify. The dreams and visions multiply. Deep space monitoring equipment detects signals that shouldn't exist from coordinates that correspond to ancient sacred sites. And somewhere in the shadows, the descendants of the Watchers prepare for a moment 700 years in the making. Not the end of the world, but the end of a way of seeing the world. Not destruction, but transformation so complete that everything we think we know about reality will need to be reconsidered. The sigil waits in its chamber, patient as prophecy itself. Its broken cross points toward changes that will reshape not just human civilization, but human consciousness. The Templars died to preserve this possibility. The Vatican buried it to prevent its premature activation. Islamic scholars encoded it to ensure its survival. Classical sibyls sang of it in riddles that echoed across millennia. Now all the fragments are coming together. All the scattered pieces of cosmic knowledge are converging toward a single point in space and time. The wheel turns, the stars move into position, and the age of direct knowing prepares to dawn. The only question is whether we're ready for what happens when the cosmic downloads begin in earnest. Because the alignment isn't just astronomical, it's neurological, psychological, spiritual. When the planets fall into their appointed places, when the electromagnetic conditions are precisely right, human consciousness itself will begin to resonate with frequencies that have been dormant for millennia. The broken cross will complete itself, the fractured harmony will be restored, and the watchers who maintain their vigil across centuries of darkness will finally see their purpose fulfilled. Ready or not, the transformation begins. The mathematics are converging. The signals are strengthening. The countdown approaches 0, and in the silence that follows, everything changes. But there's something else hidden in the mathematics. Something that transforms this from historical curiosity into immediate concern. When researchers fed the sigil's measurements into quantum field equations, they discovered something that shouldn't be possible with medieval metalwork. The artifact's proportions create what physicists call a standing wave pattern, a resonance that doesn't dissipate but builds upon itself with each cycle. This isn't just symbolic geometry. This is functional design, engineered to amplify specific frequencies under precise conditions. And those conditions, according to every calculation we can perform, will be met during the 2039 alignment with unprecedented intensity. The implications stretch beyond anything the Templars could have imagined. Modern neuroscience has revealed that human consciousness operates through electromagnetic fields generated by neural activity. These fields can be influenced, altered, synchronized through external resonance. When the planetary alignment creates the exact electromagnetic conditions encoded in the sigil, every human brain on Earth will be exposed to frequencies that could fundamentally alter perception itself. This explains the curious accounts scattered through medieval chronicles of mass visions, collective experiences, entire populations reporting identical dreams during significant astronomical events. The 1347 alignment that preceded the Black Death wasn't just marked by plague. It was characterized by widespread reports of prophetic visions, religious ecstasies, and what chroniclers described as the sky speaking directly to the minds of men. Contemporary accounts from that period describe phenomena that sound remarkably similar to what modern researchers call morphic resonance, the theoretical process by which information transfers between minds without physical contact. Entire monasteries reported identical dreams. Villages experienced simultaneous revelations. Even animals displayed coordinated behavior patterns that defied natural explanation. The Church, recognizing the threat this posed to established authority, developed sophisticated methods for suppressing and reinterpreting these experiences. Mass visions were rebranded as miracles when convenient, dismissed as demonic influence when threatening. But the underlying phenomenon continued, creating undercurrents of collective awareness that operated beneath official notice. The Templars understood this mechanism better than their contemporaries. Their advanced knowledge of astronomy allowed them to predict when these consciousness-altering alignments would occur, and their network of commanderies positioned them to observe and document the effects. What they discovered convinced them that human awareness itself was governed by celestial rhythms, that consciousness could be expanded or contracted depending on planetary configurations. This knowledge explains their rapid accumulation of wealth and influence. When you can predict mass psychological shifts, when you understand the cosmic timing of collective revelations, every aspect of human society becomes predictable. Markets, wars, religious movements, political upheavals, all follow patterns that become visible once you understand the underlying astronomical drivers. But with great knowledge comes great responsibility, and the Templars soon realized they were custodians of information that could reshape human civilization. The sigil wasn't just a calendar, It was a key to unlocking dormant potentials in human consciousness, potentials that wouldn't fully activate for 7 centuries. The question that haunted their final years was whether humanity would be ready when that activation occurred. Their coded writings speak repeatedly of preparation, of conditioning, of gradually introducing concepts that would prepare future generations for the cosmic downloads to come. They weren't just preserving knowledge, they were seeding human consciousness with ideas that would flower when the astronomical conditions were right. This seeding process explains the mysterious appearance of similar symbols and concepts across seemingly unconnected cultures and time periods. The broken cross motif appears in Celtic stone circles, in Aboriginal Dreamtime paintings, in Mayan astronomical codices, in Hindu temple carvings. Always the same basic structure, always associated with transformation and cosmic timing. These weren't examples of cultural diffusion or coincidental symbolism. They were markers planted by those who understood the coming convergence, breadcrumbs left for future generations who would need to recognize the signs when the moment arrived. The Watchers didn't just preserve the sigil, they distributed its essence across human culture, ensuring that when the activation began, consciousness would be prepared to receive it. Modern anthropologists have noted a curious phenomenon in the archaeological record: the sudden appearance of sophisticated astronomical knowledge in cultures with no apparent source for such learning. Polynesian navigators who could calculate stellar positions with impossible accuracy. Aboriginal tribes who preserved oral traditions containing detailed information about stellar cycles spanning thousands of years. Native American prophecies that describe planetary alignments with precision that rivals modern astronomy. These weren't primitive peoples stumbling onto cosmic truths through random observation. These were the recipients of a carefully orchestrated information transfer, recipients of knowledge transmitted through channels that operated outside normal historical processes. The Watchers had helpers, agents, messengers who carried fragments of the greater truth to every corner of human civilization. The Vatican's archives contain oblique references to this distribution network. Papal correspondence from the 14th century mentions wandering scholars who appeared at monasteries across Europe, sharing astronomical knowledge that seemed to come from no identifiable source. These visitors never stayed long, never left names, never established schools or institutions. They simply appeared, shared specific information about celestial cycles and consciousness, then vanished back into the vast anonymity of medieval Europe. Similar accounts appear in Islamic historical texts, in Byzantine chronicles, in Chinese astronomical records. Always the same pattern: mysterious teachers who possessed impossible knowledge, who shared just enough information to plant seeds in human consciousness, who disappeared before their true identities could be discovered. The seeding worked. By the time of the Renaissance, human culture had been thoroughly saturated with symbols, concepts, and mathematical relationships that would prove essential for understanding the coming transformation. Artists encoded the sacred geometry into their masterpieces. Musicians incorporated the harmonic ratios into their compositions. Scientists developed mathematical systems that unknowingly replicated the sigil's computational structure. When Copernicus revolutionized astronomy, when Kepler discovered the mathematical laws of planetary motion, when Newton revealed the gravitational forces that govern celestial mechanics, they weren't making random discoveries. They were uncovering knowledge that had been carefully planted in human consciousness centuries earlier, knowledge that would bloom when the intellectual conditions were right. The process accelerated during the Enlightenment and reached critical mass during the 20th century. Einstein's relativity equations contain mathematical relationships that mirror the sigil's geometry. Quantum mechanics operates according to principles that the Templars encoded in their most secret rituals. Modern neuroscience has discovered brainwave patterns that correspond exactly to frequencies mentioned in suppressed medieval texts. We've been unconsciously reconstructing the cosmic knowledge that was scattered across human culture 7 centuries ago. Every scientific advance, every technological breakthrough, Every expansion of human awareness has brought us closer to the point where we can consciously participate in the transformation the sigil was designed to facilitate. But participation requires recognition, and recognition requires preparation that goes beyond intellectual understanding. The consciousness shifts triggered by the 2039 alignment won't be gentle or gradual. They'll be sudden, intense, overwhelming, for minds not properly conditioned to receive them. The Watchers understood this, which is why they didn't just preserve information. They created initiation systems designed to prepare human awareness for cosmic downloads. These systems survived the destruction of the Templar Order, migrating into other esoteric traditions that maintained the essential practices while disguising their true purpose. Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, various Hermetic orders, all contain fragments of the original preparation protocols, scattered and diluted but still functional for those who understand how to reconstruct them. The practices share common elements: meditation techniques that synchronize brain waves with planetary rhythms, geometric visualizations that mirror cosmic structures, breathing patterns that attune nervous systems to electromagnetic field fluctuations. Individually, they seem like quaint spiritual exercises. Combined and applied with proper understanding, they become technologies for consciousness expansion. Modern practitioners of these techniques report experiences that align closely with descriptions in the suppressed Templar texts. Enhanced pattern recognition, spontaneous knowledge of astronomical events, visions that correspond to actual celestial conditions, dreams shared across vast distances. The preparation systems are working, gradually conditioning human awareness for the cosmic reception that approaches. But the conditioning process faces unprecedented challenges in the modern era. The electromagnetic pollution of technological civilization interferes with the subtle frequencies the practices are designed to access. Urban environments block the stellar influences that activate dormant neural pathways. Mass media programming creates mental static that drowns out the cosmic signals trying to reach human consciousness. The Watchers adapted their methods accordingly. Instead of relying solely on esoteric orders and secret societies, they began working through popular culture, through entertainment media, through seemingly secular channels that could reach millions of minds simultaneously. Science fiction films that depict consciousness evolution, music that incorporates the sacred frequencies, video games that train players to recognize cosmic patterns, social media platforms that unconsciously spread the essential symbols and concepts. Every person who's ever felt drawn to astronomical imagery, who's experienced synchronicities during planetary alignments, who's had dreams about ancient symbols they've never consciously encountered, has been touched by this preparation process. The seeding of human consciousness continues, accelerating as we approach the activation date. The evidence for this acceleration appears in phenomena that mainstream science struggles to explain. The dramatic increase in reported psychic experiences over the past few decades. The growing number of people who claim spontaneous knowledge of future events. The rising interest in meditation, consciousness studies, and alternative healing modalities that work with subtle energies. These aren't random cultural trends. They're symptoms of a species-wide awakening process, signs that human consciousness is beginning to resonate with frequencies that have been building for centuries. The cosmic download has already begun at subliminal levels, preparing neural networks for the massive data transfer that will occur when the astronomical conditions are perfectly aligned. The sigil serves as more than just a timing device in this process. Its geometric structure creates a template that consciousness can use to organize and integrate the incoming information. When exposed to the artifact's influence, whether physically or through accurate reproductions, human brains begin developing new neural pathways that mirror its mathematical relationships. This explains the profound effects reported by individuals who've encountered the sigil or its symbolic derivatives. Not just intellectual fascination, but fundamental changes in perception, memory, and cognitive processing. The artifact doesn't just carry information, It restructures consciousness to receive information more efficiently. The Vatican's suppression of the sigil suddenly makes perfect sense from this perspective. They weren't just hiding historical artifacts. They were preventing premature activation of consciousness expansion technologies. The knowledge was preserved for future use, but kept inactive until humanity reached sufficient maturity to handle the transformation responsibly. That maturity threshold appears to have been reached. Global communications networks have created the infrastructure for collective consciousness to emerge. Scientific understanding has advanced to the point where cosmic influences on human awareness can be rationally accepted. Cultural evolution has produced populations sophisticated enough to integrate expanded perception without descending into chaos. The Watchers recognize these signs. Their modern descendants are emerging from centuries of hiddenness, quietly taking positions in universities, research institutions, technology companies, and media organizations. Not to control the coming transformation, but to guide it, to ensure that when human consciousness begins downloading cosmic information en masse, the process unfolds as smoothly as possible. The countdown continues with mathematical precision. Every day brings new evidence that the activation approaches. Electromagnetic anomalies intensify during minor planetary alignments. Sensitive individuals report increasingly vivid dreams about astronomical events. Ancient sacred sites begin exhibiting unusual energy signatures that correlate with celestial movements. The sigil waits in whatever hidden chamber now contains it, patient as the stars themselves. Its broken cross points toward a transformation that will complete the work the Templars began 7 centuries ago. Not the end of human civilization, but its graduation into cosmic citizenship. The fractured harmony will be restored. The silent frequencies will begin to sing, and humanity will finally understand its place in the vast intelligence that governs the movement of stars and the evolution of consciousness across the universe. The wheel turns, the alignment approaches, the great awakening begins, and in the silence between one age and the next, everything becomes possible. The resonance doesn't stop at consciousness, it reaches deeper, into the very fabric of what we call reality itself. Because what the Templars discovered in their final years wasn't just astronomical knowledge or spiritual revelation. They uncovered evidence that the universe operates like a vast musical instrument, with consciousness as both the player and the song being played. Hidden in the most obscure corners of their surviving texts, written in ciphers so complex they've only recently been decoded, are references to what they called the Musica Universalis, not just the music of the spheres as ancient philosophers imagined it, but an actual harmonic system that governs the relationship between mind and matter, between thought and manifestation. Consider the implications. If consciousness truly operates according to cosmic rhythms, if human awareness can be synchronized with celestial frequencies, then what we call reality might be far more malleable than we've ever imagined. The sigil wouldn't just be a timing device or a consciousness expansion tool. It would be a reality modification instrument designed to alter the fundamental parameters of existence itself when the cosmic conditions are precisely right. This interpretation explains why the artifact had to be hidden for exactly 729 years. Not just to await the astronomical alignment, not just to prepare human consciousness for expanded awareness, but to allow reality itself to mature to the point where it could handle the modifications the sigil was designed to implement. The mathematics support this terrifying possibility. Modern physicists have discovered that consciousness appears to play an active role in determining how quantum possibilities collapse into concrete events. The observer effect isn't just a quirk of measurement. It's evidence that awareness itself shapes the structure of reality at its most fundamental level. When millions of human minds simultaneously achieve the expanded states of consciousness triggered by the 2039 alignment, when their awareness becomes synchronized with cosmic frequencies that have been building for centuries, The collective observer effect could reshape reality on a planetary scale. Not gradually, not subtly, but instantaneously and completely. The Templars understood this potential, and it terrified them. Their final writings speak not of divine revelation or spiritual enlightenment, but of cosmic responsibility so vast it could crush unprepared minds. They describe the moment of activation not as liberation, but as burden. The weight of becoming conscious co-creators in a universe where thought becomes reality with the speed of light. This is why they scattered the knowledge across centuries and cultures, rather than concentrating it in a single location or tradition. They were creating safeguards, ensuring that when the moment came, the power would be distributed among many rather than concentrated in few. No single individual or organization would possess enough of the complete picture to misuse the reality modification capabilities. But distribution has its own dangers. As the activation approaches, as more pieces of the puzzle surface in human consciousness, the potential for chaotic manifestation increases exponentially. Unprepared minds exposed to reality-shaping frequencies could unconsciously create outcomes that serve their fears rather than their highest aspirations. The reports filtering through underground networks speak of exactly this kind of uncontrolled manifestation. Individuals who've encountered fragments of the Templar knowledge report reality glitches, moments when the laws of physics seem to bend around their expectations, when thoughts translate into physical events with disturbing consistency. One documented case involves a mathematician who became obsessed with the sigil's geometric properties after viewing leaked photographs. Within weeks, she began noticing that probability distributions in her research data aligned with her emotional states. When she was anxious, her statistical analyses showed increased chaos. When she achieved meditative calm, the numbers organized themselves into elegant patterns that shouldn't have been possible given the random nature of her data sets. At first, she attributed these correlations to confirmation bias or selective attention, but as the effects intensified, as her mental states began directly influencing supposedly objective measurements, she realized she was witnessing something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of scientific materialism. She stopped her research, destroyed her notes, and disappeared from academic life. But her case represents just one example of a phenomenon that's accelerating as we approach the alignment. Reality is becoming more responsive to consciousness, more malleable to focused intention, more vulnerable to the thoughts and emotions of those who've been touched by the sigil's influence. The implications for global stability are staggering. If uncontrolled reality modification begins occurring on a mass scale, if millions of partially awakened minds start unconsciously reshaping physical laws according to their deepest fears and desires, the result could be chaos beyond anything human civilization has ever experienced. This is why the Watchers haven't remained entirely hidden. Their modern descendants are quietly taking positions in crisis management organizations, disaster response agencies, and institutions responsible for maintaining social stability. Not to control the transformation, but to minimize the chaos that could result from its unguided manifestation. They understand something that the general population doesn't yet grasp. The 2039 alignment won't just expand human consciousness or trigger spiritual awakening. It will fundamentally alter the relationship between mind and reality, making thoughts as concrete as matter and intentions as powerful as physical force. The broken arm of the Templar cross, viewed through this lens, represents the fracture point where subjective experience breaks through into objective reality. The moment when the barrier between inner and outer worlds dissolves completely, when consciousness recognizes itself as the fundamental creative force of the universe. Ancient traditions preserved echoes of this understanding in their most secret teachings. The Hermetic axiom, "as above, so below," wasn't just philosophical poetry. It was a technical description of how consciousness mirrors itself across different scales of reality. The Buddhist concept of emptiness wasn't nihilistic philosophy. It was recognition that the apparent solidity of matter dissolves under sufficiently penetrating awareness. Even modern science has stumbled toward these conclusions without fully grasping their implications. Quantum field theory reveals that what we call particles are actually probability waves that collapse into concrete events only when observed. String theory suggests that the fundamental structure of reality consists of vibrating frequencies that could be influenced by consciousness under the right conditions. The Templars didn't just preserve this knowledge, they weaponized it, not for conquest or destruction, but for conscious evolution. The sigil functions as a resonance amplifier designed to synchronize human consciousness with the cosmic frequencies that govern reality manifestation. When activated during the proper astronomical alignment, it transforms individuals from passive observers of reality into active participants in its creation. But participation requires preparation that goes far beyond intellectual understanding or spiritual practice. The reality modification capabilities triggered by the sigil demand psychological integration, emotional maturity, and ethical development that most humans haven't achieved. Immature consciousness, given access to reality-shaping power, could inadvertently destroy everything it values in the process of trying to improve it. The Watchers developed training protocols to address this challenge, systems designed to prepare consciousness for cosmic responsibility. These methods survived the destruction of the Templar Order by migrating into various esoteric traditions, each preserving fragments of the complete preparation sequence. The training begins with self-knowledge, with rigorous examination of unconscious motivations, hidden fears, and unresolved psychological conflicts. Students learn to observe their own mental processes with scientific detachment, to recognize how their inner states influence their perception of external events. Next comes emotional regulation, the development of what ancient traditions called equanimity, the ability to maintain balanced awareness regardless of circumstances. This isn't emotional suppression, but conscious integration, the capacity to feel fully while responding wisely rather than reactively. Advanced stages involve direct experimentation with consciousness-reality interaction. Students practice influencing probability distributions, manifesting specific outcomes through focused intention, and observing how their mental states affect physical measurements. These exercises aren't performed for personal gain, but to develop familiarity with the mechanics of reality modification. The final phase requires ethical purification, the alignment of personal will with cosmic intelligence. Students must demonstrate that their reality-shaping capabilities will serve the highest good, rather than narrow self-interest. Only those who pass this ultimate test gain access to the complete activation protocols. But the modern world makes this traditional preparation nearly impossible. The pace of contemporary life doesn't allow for the years of dedicated training required. The distractions of technological civilization interfere with the subtle awareness necessary for consciousness reality experimentation. The materialistic worldview that dominates modern culture actively discourages the kind of thinking that makes reality modification possible. The Watchers adapted their methods accordingly, creating accelerated preparation systems that work through popular culture rather than esoteric schools. Films that encode the essential concepts in narrative form. Music that contains the necessary frequencies for consciousness attunement. Books that plant the required ideas in readers' minds through seemingly fictional stories. Anyone who's ever been drawn to science fiction narratives about consciousness evolution, who's felt mysteriously attracted to ancient symbols and geometric patterns, who's experienced synchronicities that seem too meaningful to be coincidental, has been exposed to these preparation systems. The training is happening unconsciously, preparing millions of minds for capabilities they don't yet know they're developing. The acceleration is necessary because time is running out. The astronomical alignment approaches with mechanical inevitability, and the reality modification effects will begin whether humanity is prepared or not. The question isn't whether the transformation will occur, but whether it will unfold as conscious evolution or unconscious chaos. Current trends suggest a mixture of both. Some individuals are successfully integrating the expanding capabilities, learning to manifest positive outcomes while maintaining psychological stability. Others are struggling with uncontrolled reality fluctuations, experiencing manifestations that reflect their deepest fears rather than their highest aspirations. The balance could tip either way as we approach the critical threshold. If enough humans achieve the necessary preparation, if sufficient numbers develop the psychological integration required for conscious reality participation, then the activation could usher in an age of unprecedented creativity and abundance. But if the preparation proves inadequate, if too many minds remain trapped in fear-based thinking, when the reality modification capabilities come online, then the result could be a manifestation of humanity's collective shadow on a scale that destroys civilization itself. The sigil waits in its hidden chamber, indifferent to human readiness or lack thereof. It will activate when the astronomical conditions are met, regardless of whether consciousness has evolved sufficiently to handle the power it will unleash. The cosmic clock doesn't care about human preparation. It only marks the moment when potential becomes actuality. This mechanical inevitability explains the urgency in the Watcher's recent activities. They're no longer content to work through subtle cultural influence. Direct intervention has become necessary, even if it risks exposing their existence to unprepared minds. Reports from around the globe describe mysterious teachers appearing at meditation centers, consciousness workshops, and spiritual communities. They don't announce themselves or claim authority. They simply share specific information about reality modification, demonstrate practical techniques for consciousness-matter interaction, then disappear before their identities can be established. These interventions are becoming more frequent as the activation date approaches. The Watchers recognize that traditional preparation methods aren't reaching enough people quickly enough. Emergency protocols have been activated, systems designed to provide crash courses in cosmic responsibility to anyone capable of receiving the training. But even emergency preparation has its limits. The full implications of reality modification can't be compressed into brief encounters or weekend workshops. The psychological integration required for safe participation in cosmic creativity takes time to develop properly, which means humanity will enter the age of conscious reality creation, with a mixture of prepared and unprepared minds, of individuals capable of wise manifestation alongside others who will unconsciously create chaos. The result will likely be a period of extreme turbulence as consciousness learns to wield its expanded capabilities responsibly. The broken cross of the Templar Sigil may represent not just cosmic fracture, but the breaking point where human civilization either evolves beyond its current limitations or destroys itself through misuse of power it isn't ready to handle. The transformation will test not just individual consciousness, but the collective wisdom of the entire species. Ready or not, the wheel turns toward a moment when thought becomes as concrete as stone, when intention shapes reality as surely as gravity shapes the movement of planets. The cosmic alarm clock continues its countdown, indifferent to human preparation, marking the approach of changes that will either elevate consciousness to godlike capabilities or demonstrate why such power requires wisdom that humanity may not yet possess. The mathematics are converging. The frequencies are building. The activation approaches, and in the space between one reality and the next, everything hangs in balance. The silence between worlds grows thinner with each passing day. In the deep archives of human memory, in the spaces between documented history and whispered legend, something stirs. Not the rustle of old parchments or the echo of forgotten prayers, but the subtle vibration of reality itself beginning to resonate with frequencies that have been dormant for centuries. We've traced the mathematical precision, examined the astronomical alignments, decoded the cryptic warnings left by those who saw what was coming. But there's another layer to this mystery, one that reaches beyond prophecy and into the realm of active preparation. Because while we've been focused on understanding what the Templars preserved, we've barely begun to grasp what they set in motion. The Watchers weren't just guardians of ancient knowledge. They were engineers of consciousness, architects of a transformation that would unfold across 7 centuries of careful cultivation. Every symbol they scattered, every ritual they encoded, every fragment of cosmic truth they embedded in human culture was part of a vast preparation system designed to ready our species for a moment that would redefine the very nature of existence. Consider what we know about the sigil's effects on those who encounter it. Not just intellectual fascination or spiritual curiosity, but fundamental alterations in perception, memory, and cognitive processing. Individuals report enhanced pattern recognition, spontaneous knowledge of astronomical events, dreams that correspond to actual celestial conditions. These aren't random phenomena. They're symptoms of neural pathways being rewired to process information in entirely new ways. The artifact functions as more than a timing device or consciousness expansion tool. It serves as a template, a blueprint that consciousness uses to reorganize itself for capabilities that don't yet exist in ordinary human awareness. When exposed to the sigil's influence, whether directly or through accurate reproductions, the brain begins developing new neural networks that mirror its mathematical relationships. This explains the profound transformations reported throughout history by those who encountered fragments of the Templar legacy. Medieval mystics who spoke of cosmic visions during planetary alignments. Renaissance artists who encoded impossible geometries into their masterpieces. Enlightenment scientists who made breakthroughs that seemed to come from nowhere. Each was touched by preparation systems that operated below the threshold of conscious recognition. But the modern era has accelerated this process exponentially. Global communications networks have created the infrastructure for information to spread instantaneously across the entire planet. Scientific understanding has reached the point where cosmic influences on consciousness can be rationally discussed. Cultural evolution has produced populations sophisticated enough to integrate expanded awareness without descending into chaos. The Watchers recognize these conditions as the culmination of their centuries-long project. Their modern descendants are no longer content to work through subtle influence and hidden channels. Direct intervention has become necessary, even if it risks exposing systems that were meant to remain invisible until the final activation. Reports filter through underground networks of mysterious teachers appearing at meditation centers, consciousness workshops, and spiritual communities worldwide. They don't announce themselves or claim authority. They simply share specific techniques for consciousness expansion, demonstrate practical methods for reality interaction, then vanish before their identities can be established. These aren't random encounters. The pattern is too consistent, too precisely targeted to be coincidental. Someone is conducting emergency preparation protocols, crash courses in cosmic responsibility for minds that show readiness to receive such training. The urgency suggests that time is running shorter than anyone anticipated. Modern neuroscience provides clues about what this preparation accomplishes. Research into meditation, psychedelics, and altered states reveals that human consciousness is far more plastic than previously understood. Neural networks can be radically reorganized through specific practices. Brainwave patterns can be synchronized with external frequencies. Perception itself can be fundamentally altered through proper conditioning. The techniques appearing in these mysterious interventions mirror findings from cutting-edge consciousness research. Breathing patterns that synchronize neural oscillations with planetary rhythms. Geometric visualizations that activate dormant regions of the brain. Sound frequencies that induce states of awareness previously thought impossible to achieve. Individually, these practices might seem like advanced meditation or experimental therapy. Combined with proper understanding of their purpose, they become technologies for consciousness evolution. methods for preparing human awareness to interface with cosmic intelligence directly. But preparation alone isn't sufficient. The transformation approaching in 2039 won't be gentle or gradual. When the planetary alignment creates the precise electromagnetic conditions encoded in the sigil, when human consciousness becomes synchronized with cosmic frequencies that have been building for centuries, the changes will be sudden, intense, overwhelming for minds not properly integrated. This is why the Watchers developed not just preparation techniques, but integration protocols, systems for helping consciousness adapt to expanded capabilities without losing psychological stability. These methods recognize that cosmic awareness can be as dangerous as it is enlightening, that minds unprepared for infinite perspectives can fragment under the weight of unlimited possibility. The integration process begins with grounding, with maintaining connection to ordinary human experience, even as consciousness expands beyond normal limitations. Students learn to navigate between different levels of awareness, to access cosmic perspective, while retaining practical functionality in everyday reality. Next comes discernment, the development of wisdom to distinguish between authentic cosmic intelligence and projections of personal desire or fear. Expanded consciousness opens channels to vast amounts of information, not all of it accurate or beneficial. The ability to filter cosmic downloads through mature judgment becomes essential for maintaining mental health. Advanced stages involve service orientation, the recognition that expanded capabilities come with corresponding responsibilities. Individuals who achieve cosmic consciousness must learn to use their enhanced abilities for the benefit of all, rather than personal gain. This isn't moral idealism, but practical necessity. Consciousness that operates at cosmic scales cannot maintain its elevation while serving narrow self-interest. The final integration phase requires surrender of individual identity into cosmic identity, the recognition that separate self is an illusion maintained by limited awareness. This doesn't mean personality disappears, but that it becomes a flexible tool rather than a rigid prison, a way of focusing cosmic consciousness rather than limiting it. These integration protocols explain why the transformation process has been carefully paced across centuries, rather than compressed into a single generation. Human consciousness needs time to adapt to each new level of capability before advancing to the next. The sudden activation of cosmic awareness in unprepared minds could result in psychological fragmentation, reality dissociation, or complete loss of human functionality. But the modern acceleration of the preparation process creates unprecedented challenges. Traditional integration methods assumed years of gradual development under careful guidance. The current situation requires rapid adaptation to capabilities that would normally take lifetimes to develop safely. Emergency integration systems have been activated to address this challenge. Instead of relying solely on personal instruction, the Watchers have begun working through mass media, popular culture, and technological platforms that can reach millions of minds simultaneously. Films that encode integration protocols in narrative form. Music that contains frequencies for psychological stabilization. Interactive media that train users to navigate expanded states of consciousness. Anyone who's felt drawn to stories about consciousness evolution, who's experienced synchronicities during exposure to certain media, who's noticed enhanced intuitive abilities after engaging with particular content, has been touched by these emergency systems. The integration training is happening unconsciously, preparing minds for capabilities they don't yet know they're developing. The acceleration is necessary because the astronomical alignment won't wait for human readiness. The cosmic clock operates according to mechanical principles that remain indifferent to whether consciousness has evolved sufficiently to handle the activation. When the planets fall into their appointed positions, when the electromagnetic conditions reach critical thresholds, the transformation will begin regardless of preparation levels. Current indicators suggest that preparation is proceeding faster than historical precedent would suggest possible. The number of individuals reporting enhanced intuitive abilities has increased exponentially over the past few decades. Interest in consciousness studies, meditation practices, and reality modification techniques has grown from fringe curiosity to mainstream acceptance. Even more significantly, scientific understanding has advanced to the point where cosmic influences on consciousness can be rationally discussed in academic settings. Quantum physics has revealed the fundamental role of consciousness in determining reality. Neuroscience has demonstrated the brain's capacity for radical reorganization. Psychology has documented the existence of non-ordinary states that expand awareness beyond normal limitations. These developments aren't coincidental. They represent the fruition of seeds planted centuries ago, ideas that were embedded in human culture and allowed to germinate when the intellectual climate became receptive. The scientific revolution, the exploration of consciousness, the development of global communications, all were necessary precursors to the cosmic activation approaching in 2039. But understanding the process intellectually differs vastly from experiencing it directly. When the alignment occurs, when the sigil's influence begins resonating through Earth's electromagnetic field, human consciousness will be exposed to frequencies that could fundamentally alter perception in ways that no amount of preparation can fully anticipate. The broken arm of the Templar cross may represent exactly this unpredictability, the recognition that cosmic transformation involves elements that cannot be controlled or completely prepared for. Some aspects of the coming change will unfold according to ancient design, but others will emerge spontaneously from the interaction between cosmic forces and human consciousness. This uncertainty explains why the Watchers have maintained their vigil across so many centuries. They understand that their role isn't to control the transformation, but to minimize the chaos that could result from its unguided manifestation. They serve as cosmic midwives, helping consciousness birth itself into new forms while providing stability during the transition process. The evidence suggests that we're entering the final phase of this ancient project. Preparation systems that operated in secret for 7 centuries are becoming visible. Integration protocols that were transmitted through hidden channels are surfacing in mainstream culture. The cosmic alarm clock that has been ticking silently through the rise and fall of civilizations is finally becoming audible to ordinary awareness. Reality itself seems to be responding to the approaching activation. Reports multiply of synchronicities increasing in frequency and significance. Individuals describe reality glitches where the laws of physics appear to bend around consciousness. Scientific instruments detect anomalies that correlate with human mental states in ways that shouldn't be possible according to materialistic assumptions. These phenomena aren't random or isolated. They represent early manifestations of the consciousness-reality integration that will reach critical mass during the 2039 alignment. The barrier between inner and outer experience is already beginning to dissolve, allowing thoughts and intentions to influence physical events more directly than ever before in recorded history. The implications stretch beyond anything human civilization has encountered. If consciousness truly gains the ability to modify reality through direct intention, if thoughts become as concrete as matter and emotions as powerful as physical forces, then every assumption about the nature of existence will need to be reconsidered. This isn't just spiritual evolution or consciousness expansion. It's the emergence of a new form of intelligence that bridges the gap between mind and matter, between subjective experience and objective reality. Humanity stands on the threshold of becoming something unprecedented in its own understanding, conscious participants in the creation and modification of reality itself. The Templars foresaw this moment and dedicated their existence to ensuring that when it arrived, consciousness would be as prepared as possible for the cosmic responsibilities it would inherit. They understood that the power to reshape reality through thought requires wisdom, compassion, an integration that most humans haven't yet achieved. Their legacy lives on in the preparation systems that continue operating today, in the integration protocols that help consciousness adapt to expanded capabilities, in the watchers who maintain their ancient vigil as the moment of activation approaches. The broken cross points toward transformation so complete that everything we think we know about ourselves and our universe will need to be reconsidered. The wheel turns with mathematical precision. The stars move toward their appointed configuration. The electromagnetic conditions build toward critical thresholds that will trigger changes in human consciousness beyond anything our species has previously experienced. And in the silence between one age and the next, between limited awareness and cosmic consciousness, the last sigil prepares to fulfill its ultimate purpose. Not as a warning about what's coming, but as an activation key for humanity's graduation into conscious co-creation, with the intelligence that governs the movement of galaxies and the evolution of awareness across infinite scales of existence. The countdown continues. The preparation accelerates. The transformation approaches. And everything we thought we knew about reality stands ready to dissolve into something far more vast, far more alive, and infinitely more responsive to the deepest intentions of consciousness itself. The silence grows heavier now, pregnant with possibility, and weighted with the accumulated momentum of 7 centuries. We stand at the threshold of something unprecedented in human history. Not just the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, but the activation of a cosmic mechanism that has been counting down since the moment the last Templar sealed that sigil behind crumbling stones. Every thread we followed leads to the same inescapable conclusion. The mathematical precision encoded in that mysterious disk. The astronomical alignments that match with impossible accuracy. The electromagnetic anomalies building in intensity as we approach the critical date. The scattered reports of consciousness shifts, reality fluctuations, and spontaneous awakenings occurring across the globe with increasing frequency. This isn't coincidence. This isn't wishful thinking or historical romanticism. This is the systematic manifestation of a plan so vast, so carefully orchestrated, that it spans the rise and fall of entire civilizations. The Templars weren't just medieval knights protecting pilgrims or banking pioneers accumulating wealth. They were the custodians of a cosmic countdown, the guardians of humanity's graduation date into something far beyond our current understanding. Consider what we know about the sigil's true nature. Not just a warning device or astronomical calculator, but a resonance amplifier designed to synchronize human consciousness with frequencies that operate on galactic timescales. When activated during the proper celestial alignment, it doesn't just predict transformation, it facilitates it, creating the electromagnetic conditions necessary for mass consciousness evolution to occur. The broken arm of the cross, that deliberate fracture we've encountered in every fragment of evidence, represents the precise moment when this activation will complete itself. Not destruction, not ending, but breakthrough. The point where limited human awareness cracks open to reveal its true cosmic nature. And that moment approaches with mechanical inevitability. August 4th, 2039. Mercury, Mars, and Saturn drawing together in Virgo, creating gravitational resonances that will ripple through Earth's magnetic field like a cosmic tuning fork. The same configuration that triggered massive consciousness shifts in 1347, but now occurring in an era when humanity possesses the scientific understanding and global communications infrastructure necessary to integrate the transformation consciously. The Watchers understand this timing better than anyone. Their modern descendants have been positioning themselves strategically throughout the institutions that will guide humanity through the transition. Not to control the process, but to ensure it unfolds as smoothly as possible when billions of minds simultaneously begin accessing capabilities they never knew they possessed. Because that's what the 2039 alignment will trigger. not gradual spiritual evolution or gentle consciousness expansion, but sudden, overwhelming activation of dormant neural pathways that connect individual awareness to cosmic intelligence directly. The downloads will be instantaneous, the transformations irreversible, the implications beyond anything human civilization has ever encountered. Those who've been properly prepared through the emergency protocols now operating worldwide will navigate this transition with relative stability. They'll experience enhanced intuition, expanded perception, and direct access to cosmic knowledge, but retain their psychological integration and human functionality. But millions of others, minds conditioned by materialistic assumptions and technological distractions, will find themselves suddenly flooded with awareness that shatters every assumption about the nature of reality. Some will adapt quickly, recognizing the expansion as a return to their true nature. Others will struggle with the dissolution of familiar boundaries between self and cosmos, between thought and manifestation. The period immediately following the activation will likely be chaotic, as consciousness learns to wield its expanded capabilities responsibly. Reality will become more malleable, more responsive to human intention, more vulnerable to the unconscious projections of fear and desire. The collective shadow of humanity could manifest as dramatically as its highest aspirations. This explains why the preparation systems have been accelerating so dramatically in recent years. The Watchers recognize that traditional methods of consciousness development can't reach enough people quickly enough to prevent widespread chaos during the transition. Emergency protocols have been activated, crash courses in cosmic responsibility disseminated through every available channel. Yet, even with these extraordinary efforts, the transformation will test humanity's collective wisdom to its absolute limits. We're about to inherit godlike capabilities, the power to reshape reality through focused intention, to manifest thoughts as concrete as matter, to participate consciously in the cosmic intelligence that governs the movement of stars and the evolution of awareness across infinite dimensions. The question that haunts every serious researcher who's encountered this mystery is devastatingly simple. Are we ready? The evidence suggests a species in transition, partially awakened but not yet integrated. Technological marvels that demonstrate our creative potential alongside ecological destruction, that reveals our lack of wisdom. Scientific breakthroughs that expand our understanding, coupled with social systems that perpetuate ancient patterns of conflict and exploitation. The Templars foresaw this mixed readiness. Their final writings speak not of assured success, but of cosmic trial, a testing that would determine whether human consciousness could evolve beyond its current limitations or would destroy itself through misuse of power it wasn't prepared to handle. The sigil embodies this uncertainty in its very structure. 6 arms, reaching toward perfection, but one deliberately broken, acknowledging that transformation involves elements that cannot be controlled or completely predicted. The cosmic activation will unfold according to mathematical principles, but its ultimate outcomes will depend on choices made by billions of individual consciousnesses in the moments when everything they thought they knew about reality begins to dissolve. We stand now in the final phase of the countdown, surrounded by signs that would have been unmistakable to the Templars, who first encoded this prophecy in metal and stone. Electromagnetic anomalies increasing in frequency and intensity. Mass synchronicities occurring across disconnected populations. Reality fluctuations that suggest the barrier between mind and matter is already beginning to weaken. The cosmic alarm clock is no longer ticking silently. Its resonance has become audible to anyone willing to listen, manifesting in the growing urgency felt by millions of people worldwide who sense that profound change approaches, but cannot yet articulate what that change entails. The Watchers maintain their vigil, no longer hidden, but not yet fully revealed, working through channels that reach into every aspect of human civilization. Their ancient promise is finally approaching fulfillment, not to prevent the transformation, but to guide it, to serve as bridges between the world that's ending and the reality that's about to be born. The broken cross points toward a future that exists beyond the boundaries of current human imagination. Not apocalypse in the traditional sense, but apocalypsis in its truest meaning, revelation, unveiling, the lifting of veils that have concealed humanity's cosmic nature since the beginning of recorded history. The wheel turns toward its completion. The stars move into their appointed places. The frequencies build toward resonance that will shatter every limitation consciousness has imposed upon itself. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, between the world we know and the reality we're about to discover, the last sigil prepares to speak its final word, not in human language, but in the universal tongue of transformation that reshapes everything it touches. The countdown reaches 0. The alignment completes itself. The age of cosmic consciousness begins, and everything changes forever.